Well, when Dana asked me to do this, when we started thinking about the sorts of things I could talk about, it's true. I do a lot of public speaking. It's almost never just me. Sometimes it is. But it's usually in the context of an interview. Maybe I'm interviewing an artist, or a panel at which I'm moderating, or I'm on the panel. So it's always kind of in context, and it's never just sort of me giving this narrative. So I thought, well, we all want to hear it, just say what you want, right? Because that's total freedom, but sometimes you need a little bit more direction than that. And so at first Dana was saying, well, I really want this to be exactly what you said about the artist's point of view. And I thought, well, I'm not an artist, I'm an art critic, which is not as antagonistic as it sounds, actually, or at least not the way I do it. But I was an art history major, and when I was an art history major, at the time, the school I went to, was Vassar, which is both better and worse than it sounds also. The studio art majors were required to take art history courses, but the art history majors were not required to take studio classes. And I thought, halfway through my junior year, that that was sort of unfair to everyone, and that if I was going to write about it, I should know something about doing it, which it turns out is really hard. So that discouraged me on the one hand, and also deepened my respect on the other hand. So as a writer, I've had to make these kinds of decisions to be friends with artists, which enriches my life but complicates my job, and all that kind of stuff. And part of the reason that I didn't in the end decide that I wanted to talk too much about the artist's point of view is that since I have close relationships with a great number of artists who live and work in LA and elsewhere, New York where I'm from, and in the age of the internet, sort of everywhere, a lot of times they come to me for advice, or they confide in me, or something like that, and I felt like I tend to know a lot about the struggle and the scary parts, but not in the adventurous scary sense, but the sort of what the hell am I going to do now? Where should I go? Can you think of somebody besides yourself who would support me? All that stuff, and I didn't really want to, betrayal's not the word because I wasn't going to use any names, but I really didn't want to be sort of negative about it. And I started thinking, well, so what else can I contribute to this conversation? And I realized the answer is in the question itself, which is the word conversation, which is both a literal thing that you can do with other people, an action you can take, but it's also this kind of metaphorical framework for the kinds of things that both are going on in this room tonight with this event, but also more broadly, I think, in our culture, in our visual culture especially, which is this idea of different disciplines, different kinds of practices, and different sets of ideas conversing with each other. So, for example, art, music, photography, fashion, architecture, the new neighborhood that it's being built in Hollywood with the historical buildings, but the modern experience, and all of these things that I just realized we live in a time right now where it's kind of everything all at once, and the old distinctions that you make between whether you're a fashion designer, a performance artist, a video artist, a musician, that all of these things are not only blurring, but that actually that's the most exciting thing that's going on right now, is the way that these things blur into each other. And so I made just a quick list, and it's sort of this conversation that we're having, this event, is an example of people with different sets of interests coming together to have this kind of shared experience, and you find something in another discipline than your own that appeals to you, and connections are made to, I remember 6 or 7 years ago I was in New York and I went to the Apollo upstairs. They have a little smaller rooms, twice the size maybe. And DJ Spooky was in there, and he was doing his set and his live kind of stuff. And he was kind of remixing a live musician, but then he also had this other database of images and antique cinema images, like Thomas Edison films and things. And he was remixing those too. And at the time, you haven't seen a lot of that, at least beyond underground stuff. And here's this famous guy. And he's gone on to really integrate visual arts in his practice as a DJ, almost film producer by the time you get to the end of designing a stage show. And then increasingly you look at people like the Dub Lab and the Stones Throw people, and they're musicians like that, but this idea of this sampling as something that's really common in the DJ production realm has a lot of allegorical insight into the way that art is made these days, and especially with technology, but not always. You know, collage is big again right now. But you know, this idea of mixing things. Is it a sculpture, or is it an environment for a performance? And it's really all of that, just kind of like the pre-staging for what will be a video piece in the end. That's what most people will experience. And if it's going to be video, should there be audio? And if there's going to be sound, should it be my friend's band that does it? And oh, it probably should, because my friend that's in that band, whose music I love, also paints all their own album covers and does all their own music videos. And it's sort of like all of these categories are just have just become irrelevant, which is this really, really exciting thing. And then I thought, well, okay, we have Timur right here, who I know Dana's going to be speaking with later, and he's working on something right now, the Crescent City, which is, they're calling it a hyper opera. And a visual artist is designing the sets, and there's all of this kind of interdepartmental, for lack of a better phrase, collaboration. And then I just yesterday got my tickets to go see My Barbarian at Red Cat, and they're a visual art collective, but they're doing musical theater at Red Cat. So, okay, they're artists. It wasn't even a crossover, but yet that's what their art is like, are these kind of like built up from the ground, politically savvy kind of musical experiences. And I feel like, so as a writer, and as a person in the media, and as a person just observing you know, the culture that we're in, I think that is the most important thing. And you know, that is sort of the future of really every creative undertaking, whatever your business is in. It's not enough to do one thing anymore, no matter how good you are at it. And that's a sweeping generalization, but it's not even that. It's like nobody wants to just do one thing anymore. It's not enough for the people themselves. It's not about, oh, the market requires that it's like, no, I myself feel free to do all these other things and to recognize how they are all my art, or all my vision. And that sometimes that has to be a drawing, sometimes it has to be a music video. And then I realized, well, okay, well, where do I work? You know, where have I worked as an art critic? And it's true that a lot of the places that I have written for and do continue to write for are these kinds of straightforward art criticism, you know, white hot as exhibition reviews and interviews and things. But if you look at LA Canvas, for example, which you'll see their current issue everywhere here tonight, where I'm the art and books editor, this was our music issue, but I still needed to write about art, and it was like an embarrassment of riches. The opportunity I had to talk to people who pursued both equally, who were eloquent about the way in which their visual and musical practices informed each other. There was nothing forced. It came really naturally, and I realized, you know, when it's our music editor's turn to write about, you know, when it's the art issue, she's not going to have any trouble either, because that's what our culture is about right now, is this kind of mixed bag, kind of mixed nuts kind of thing. And I think it's a really exciting time to be active in avant-garde culture right now, especially because that's not confusing anymore. We're at a point now where everybody gets that that's what's happening, you know, right? It's not like, wait, so are you an artist or fashion designer? I mean, I can't tell you a number of artists my age and older who've gotten yelled at from their gallerist because something they're trying to do is not their brand, right? You're a sculptor, what are you doing this film for? You know, like, people, that's starting to change. And I think we've turned a corner where that's, you know, what's happening. And I think what's exciting is that it's not just in visual art, it's everything. It's not even just in culture, it's in politics and urban design and just like everything you can name. There's just this increasing openness about borrowing from other disciplines. And I was joking with someone earlier, my dad is a scientist, and it's taken until now for us to actually kind of realize we have all this stuff in common, because places like the Museum of Modern Art do the nanotechnology design show or whatever. And so it's become easier to figure it out, and I think we're all to stand to benefit from that. And it being this kind of event, as Dana was explaining it to me, how it comes together, I think is kind of the perfect example of that. Is this is, usually when I do an art talk, it's in a gallery and I know every single person there. And it's fantastic that I don't, because there are people who aren't here for me, and there are people who are, and we're all just going to have, be able to talk with each other and exchange ideas. And so that, those are the kinds of things that this event tonight made me think about. And I have a bunch of other examples, but I'll save those for mingling after. I'll go, have you heard about Bites? Have you heard about the new KCT show? Have you heard about, so I've got a lot of those for later. Come talk to me in the back.
You want to ask
now we don't have to write them down now. Yeah, and so that's pretty much how this event inspired me to start thinking about what I do and what is going on in LA right now. And that's what I have to say.
There you go. So Shana writes, for the LA Weekly, and used to be Flavor Pill, I guess, I'm not sure, and LA Canvas and all that stuff. And she also interviews artists, they're online quite a bit, and she's easy to find. If you can spell her name, like there's nobody else with her name spelled like that. But are there any questions here that anybody would have for somebody?
Well, if you Google Dambrot, you'll get a whole basketball thing in Akron, Ohio.
Oh, okay. Well, Shana
but that's another
Dambrot.
Yeah. Yes, Galen.
Seems like a good time. Snapshot question. What was your take on Pacific Standard Time?
Oh, okay. Well, I was happy that it happened because I do feel like in the end they ended up kind of doing their core mission successfully, which was to bring our foundations, to the attention of a new generation of people who, now with the benefit of hindsight, could figure out why it was important. And that's what a historical survey does. And it wasn't necessarily, with a few exceptions, and the exceptions were brilliant, it was a little bit sort of boring as an experience goes. I mean, it's kind of like if you're bored, it's your own fault. Use your mind to find something. But I don't think it was their fault. I think that the work in question, a lot of which was performative or temporary or non-archival in certain deliberate ways, kind of you had no choice but to look at black and white photographs of it. That's nobody's fault. That was just what it was. There's only so many giant rooms of black and white photographs and extensive wall text that you can be expected to navigate as a sentient being. But I do think they did a good job, and I loved the certain aspects of the public and performance art. I was one of the For Your Art correspondents, and I went to a few different things. My favorite was Punk Night at Mocha, mostly because it was awesome. It was just like a great music show. But it was one of those occasions where it wasn't just like, oh, I get to see X at a museum for free. It was like, wait a minute, this experience of this music and transposing it back onto when it was first released actually does have an aesthetic and a kind of a contextual insight to offer into the content of the show inside the museum, where in fact one of the most lively parts was an installation of Target video that Henry Rollins had curated. So that was one of those things where music at a museum could just be an add-on, but actually, both because of the way they approached it and because of the fact of the art itself, it actually deepened your understanding of what went on inside PST, and I think there were a lot of different examples of that. And so, on balance, good for them. I think Bank of America will be thrilled with what they paid for, which is great, because I bank with them, which I'm kind of embarrassed about, but when I remember when PST started, I remember thinking, well, this is where all those $35 fees are going. So I guess I'm cool with that. You're welcome, Pacific Standard Time. And then I got press passes to everything, and it was free, and I felt like that was the least they could do. But on balance, good for them. So, great question.
Beautiful. Well, thank you.